Hey everyone, and welcome to another special edition of Fantasy Sports Review. I'm your host, Rob Castro. Before we introduce our one special guest tonight, I'd like to take a special thanks for Phil Harges for directing our show tonight. You see Phil and I always on Fantasy Football Review and Fantasy Sports Review, but he's taking a back seat tonight. We're talking a little bit of hockey. He's a big Cavs fan, and I know he's really excited to talk about the series, but we have our special hockey guru, Natalie Gerson, in the studios today. Before we get started with that, we want to thank Becca from the Washington Wizards for supplying us with tickets to the Wizards-Bobcats game the other night. Great game. Wizards won. They're actually on a 5-game winning streak. They beat the Lily Bobcats by 16 points. Actually 18 points, and 16 points were scored by John Wall. Again, Becca, thanks so much for giving us those tickets. Can't wait to see you for the draft. All right, so let's get started tonight. Big Cavs win last night. And before we get started with that, let's introduce Natalie Gerson to the show. Natalie, thanks for coming on.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Now, this hockey playoff has been crazy. No doubt about it. There's been a lot of great series. The Penguins-Flyers series has been great. The Western Conference kind of boring. I mean, no games really decided by 1 or 2 goals like the Capitals and Bruins game. But before we get started with that, we have 2 Game 7s going on right now as we speak, and that's the Ottawa Senators going into New York, into Madison Square Garden, tough place to play, playing the New York Rangers, and then also the nightcap tonight, we have the New Jersey Devils going to Florida to take on the Panthers. Natalie, this has been a crazy, like we say all the time, it's been a great hockey series so far. What's kind of stood out in your mind?
I think honestly, just the amount of goals that have gone back and forth through some of the series, especially with the Penguins versus the Flyers. The goaltenders, I think, have stuck out and across both the West and the East. When it really comes down to it, depending on the way the goalies are playing, I think that's who's going to, win in these series.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, and you talk about that Penguins-Flyers game, or series actually, and I understand you're a Penguins fan.
I am.
We got to throw that out there.
Born and raised Pittsburgh. Can't help
it. So the first 2 games were in Pittsburgh, obviously the higher seed. They're up by 3 goals in the first period. Then all of a sudden, the Flyers come back and take game 1. What kind of impact did that have on the Penguins?
Honestly, when you're going into a series and you have to depend on your defense and some of the way that your goalie's playing, and that's, going in a little shaky. And then I don't know what happened with Fleury and the defense in that, but you can't be up 3-0 and going into it and losing 4 goals and losing 4-3 in overtime in game 1. I mean, you just can't let that happen.
That and to me, that kind of set the tone for the whole entire series. You watch that, and then you kind of see why the Pittsburgh Penguins, who've been so, you talk about the whole entire season in a nutshell. They had been playing fantastic hockey without Sidney Crosby.
Correct.
And then Malkin's been in and out of injuries, and their coach Dan Bielema has done a great job all season long, kind of helping that team out a little bit. And then you go back and you look at that whole entire season, and you say, what the hell happened to the Pittsburgh Penguins?
Exactly. When you're going into a playoff and you're up and you're definitely picked by Vegas to go ahead and win this series, and you go in and you go down 3-0, it's pretty tough to come back from that. I mean, I think the Penguins definitely came back a little bit in order to win those 2 games. But it was just tough after that in order to be able to win that whole series. So I think they fought hard, but with no defense, you just can't do it.
Yeah, you're absolutely, and you know what? That's what the Capitals have stressed all season long. They haven't been scoring as amount of goals. Alexander Ovechkin, their best player, one of the best players in hockey. You probably wouldn't agree with that. It's kind of taken a nosedive in the point totals, but all in all, you look at that series. Just a lot of goals scored. I mean, the Flyers coming into next series, I don't really think they're going to bring as much intensity as they did the first one. Because, there was just so much. There was great play going back and forth. What do you, in your mind, what do the Flyers have to do to kind of raise up and prove everyone wrong and play defense? I mean, you saw it firsthand.
You just can't let that many goals in. One fun fact from that series is 56 goals were scored total throughout that entire thing.
That's got to be a record.
I would assume so, too.
6 games, it didn't go
6 games,
7.
56 goals.
And for all your viewers out there, it's what, almost 10 goals a game?
I mean, there were 2 games alone, there were 13 goals that were scored. So anybody who's not a hockey fan is going to enjoy watching hockey when that many goals are being scored. But
you're right.
With the Flyers and Giroux and Briere and all those guys, Yager, Talbot, they've got so many powerhouses up front to be able to score those goals. we'll see what happens.
All right, so now, and I even said going in, that was probably the most exciting series. Let's take a little back seat. We're going to talk about our hometown team, the Washington Capitals. Got done on the road last night in Game 7, pivotal game. You saw a lot of great hockey the whole entire series. The only series in playoff history where every single goal was decided by one goal, and then there was also 4 overtimes. That broke 2 records. I mean, what more can you say about that series?
No, pretty impressive, especially when you've got Tim Thomas in goal. I mean, everything back and forth within that series. But it's going to depend on what's going to happen going on here pretty soon. But, one thing with that, too, I was pretty surprised with the amount of time that Ovechkin did not play in this series, especially going into last night's game. Going into the third period, he was only, I think, had 12 minutes of playing time.
Yeah, we never see that.
Halfway through that. But I guess, depending on what the coach is thinking with that, I mean, when you have that big of when you're playing against Boston, the reigning champs, you've got to think more defensively, I think. And so Ovechkin not being an offensive-minded player, you use him whenever you need him. So I could see them putting him in only when you need him because he's, instead of having 4 more defensive players on the ice, makes sense.
You're right. And then one of the biggest question marks going into the game was the goaltender interaction with the Capitals. Braden Holtby starting for the Capitals in place of Michael Neuwirth, who's been their star all season long, and Thomas Vokoun, who was injured. I mean, they really had an emergency backup in Game 1 coming from the AHL to back up Holtby because Neuwirth couldn't go. So that was one of the biggest things, I thought, and Holtby really stood his own.
Absolutely. Being able to pull him up from Hershey and him playing the way that he did, with the confidence that he did, I thought just really, proved how he did with the Caps, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even an outsider looking in, like you are now, because I know you're not a Caps fan, you're not from around here. It's very tough for a rookie goaltender. I know he played very sparingly last season. He only played in 6 games this year. Calling on Holtby to lead the Capitals into the next round, that's going to be huge. But also dethroning the Stanley Cup champions is even bigger. Let's see if they got, we'll talk more about that as the show goes on and what they need to do in the second round. But switching gears a little bit, we'll talk about another series that's going on right now, the Rangers and Ottawa Senators. First 2 games, I think there's like 280 penalty minutes in the first 2. Crazy series so far. Daniel Alfredsson back from injury. Talk us through a little bit of Game 6. It was a do or die for the New York Rangers.
Absolutely.
What did you see in that game?
It was do or die for the New York Rangers, and I just thought, back to goaltenders again. Lundqvist was on fire with that game. And, going into the third period being up 3-1, and seeing the goal that was scored by Jason Spezza, I can see why Lundqvist got pretty fired up over that. I mean, if you look at the review, I don't know what you think about it, but I thought that I saw a pretty much big kicking motion there by Jason Spezza, and I can see why Lundqvist would have gotten pretty fired up over that game.
No, you're absolutely right, it's kind of a whirlwind of emotions going in because the Senators have been winning these very close games in Madison Square Garden. That's a tough place to play.
It's an absolutely miserable place to play if you're an offender of that team. I mean, it just is. The fans are brutal. That place is tough to play. I mean, it's loud in there, and New York's a great team, and they're on fire this year.
You're absolutely right. And also, going into this game, something you revealed earlier is that Ottawa is what in Game 7?
Ottawa is 0-4 going into Game 7, so this is going to be a pretty tough place for Ottawa to play, especially in New York, Madison Square Garden, in front of the home fans.
Well, yeah, and like I said, the game's going on right now, so we really don't even know who the Caps or the Flyers are playing next round. And with that said, also another game in Game 7, Panthers-Devils. Hasn't really been that great of a series, really. I mean, it went into Game 7, but you got the Panthers that will go out and score 4 or 5 goals one game and then get shut out the next game. It's kind of been really inconsistent.
It's definitely been back and forth between the two teams. I don't think anyone really knows what's going to happen in Game 7. Jose Theodore was out in Game 6 with an injury, and he's supposed to come back and play tonight, so we'll see if he's going to be in there for the Panthers tonight.
You're right. All right, so we're going to not talk about the Eastern Conference anymore. Something that has shaped up is the Western Conference.
Yes.
We already know who each team's playing in the second round. Some of the recaps in the first round, well, obviously you see the Vancouver Canucks, the President's Cup trophy winners from this past season. What happened? They lost to the Los Angeles Kings. Mm-hmm. It's kind of weird how, you have that stigma on your back. President's Cup trophy winners losing in the first round. It's happened before. LA Kings, I guess, were just too hot to handle. And again, Roberto Luongo doesn't come through in the clutch.
Yeah, really, really difficult seeing Luongo being one of their big guys for so long being pulled in that series. I mean, that's got to shake up a team, any team, when you're going into a playoff situation. Okay. And honestly, I think Luongo might be in trouble after this in the offseason. I don't know if he'll come back. Maybe Corey Schneider might be the goalie stepping in. Who knows? But it's pretty tough seeing long go.
Yeah, and another big key injury in that series was Daniel Seddon had a concussion, was back for Game 6. Didn't really matter because they lost the game anyways. I don't know how much of an impact it would have made in the series, and I'm not even trying to get there, but the LA Kings, you got to give them their hats off. Jonathan Quick, their goaltender for LA, he was on fire the whole entire series.
Absolutely. Absolutely on fire. And again, back to the goalies. I mean, it's back to the goalies and Jonathan Quick. If you ask anybody, I mean, he's going to be pivotal in that series for them. And also, you can't, take away from their offense as well. They got Mike Richards in the offseason from Philadelphia, who played there for, I think, something like 6 seasons. That was a big loss for the Flyers, but, I mean, definitely a great pull for the Kings. And you also have Drew Doughty, who's just silly up there. I mean, you put Doughty and Richards together, and it's just boom, boom, boom into the goal.
You're absolutely right. And to be honest with you, the Canucks pride themselves on goaltending and defense, and they get timely scoring from a bunch of different guys, but that wasn't there this whole entire season. And you got to credit Jonathan Quick. We'll break down the next matchup, but another big key series that we saw was the St. Louis Blues and San Jose Sharks. San Jose Sharks, one of the best teams in the regular season, and they just never get it done in the playoffs. I don't know why, but St. Louis, for people out there that don't know, have two of the best, have actually, I think, the best goalie combination in the NHL with Halak and Brian Elliott. Brian Elliott was a backup last season and really came through to lead the St. Louis Blues this year. They started out very, very slow and really turned it on. Andy McDonald's their best player. He had 4 goals in that series. But again, you just see the San Jose Sharks crumbling with Joe Thornton. They have some, great. I think they have an awesome team. Very well coached. But again, they just can't get it done in the playoffs.
Exactly, and I think St. Louis and Vancouver, I think, were 2 of the top teams going into the West, into the playoffs. And I'm actually not pretty surprised. I'm not that surprised that St. Louis pulled this one off, and I can see them doing pretty well from the rest of the series.
Yeah, San Jose won the first game, and you really thought that it was like, all right, this San Jose team, kind of like the Washington Capitals, we're going to turn it on and maybe do something, but they never did, and it proved costly again. They're up 2-0 in one game and lose 3-2 in the third period. That turned out to be the ultimate dagger. So,
yeah.
But yeah, moving along, the Coyotes and Blackhawks. Another team in Chicago who, they have the big 3. They won the Stanley Cup 2 years ago. They have Jonathan Toews, Patrick Sharp, and Patrick Kane. Great players.
Right.
Again, goaltending's an issue, and it really showed in the series.
Yeah, definitely. Mike Smith, though, again, another great goalie who was just absolutely on fire. He had 39 saves in Game 6 to steal this win, and it's tough to not talk about the goalies in all of these series. But Mike Smith is going to be pretty pivotal in all of this stuff too.
Yeah, you're right. And again, you see Chicago not in there. It's not a familiar spot for them because they've actually built up a really good team the past 4 or 5 seasons through the draft. Ray Emery, they're one of their, Crawford's their backup, or Emery's their backup, whoever gets the nod that night.
Bringing in Hossa
And then Hossa, too.
Yep.
But, you saw the hit that Torres had on Hossa. And that's one of the things we want to talk about, too, is the suspensions in hockey. This guy gets 25 games, knocks out one of the best players in Chicago. Marian Hossa, has been so dominant for, 5-10 seasons, and doesn't get a smell of the second round.
No. I think he had a tough time when he was with us, and then he left and went to Detroit, and then he finally found a home when he was in Chicago. They ended up winning the Cup, and it was really tough to see him get injured and have to be out for the rest of the series.
Yeah, and you know what? To give Brendan Shanahan a lot of credit, I know that the Caps fans were, really distraught that Baxter missed a game for his hit right towards the end of the game in Game 4. Or Game 5, Game 4. And, that's another thing, too. You cannot, and you stress this a lot, there's a lot of hitting that goes in hockey. I understand the game's physical, but in retrospect, too, looking back, Hossa being out, that could have really, that hit was...
It's absolutely huge, and there's got to be a fine line when enough is enough when it comes to some of these things. So I think Brendan Shanahan is going to have to crack down on this. Being a Pittsburgh fan and watching the Penguins and seeing Sidney Crosby out not once but twice with multiple head injuries, you really have to see how people are hitting and kind of take things into account with that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And finally, the last series wasn't that, well, no one really talks about it, but Nashville Predators beating the Detroit Red Wings. I can't remember the time that Nashville moved on to the second round because it's never happened before. And then you also see that Detroit hasn't lost an opening round playoff since 2006 when they lost to Edmonton in the first round. Detroit just, I guess, showed their age in this one. I mean, you got Pavel Datsyuk, Henrik Zetterberg. I mean, those guys are getting up there in age, and it really showed against Nashville.
I agree. I don't think that there's many people that would think that Detroit would be out in one of the first rounds going into this, especially with those big guys, like you said, Datsyuk and Zetterberg. But these guys are getting older, and I just don't know if they can compete against some of these younger teams. I would not have picked Nashville going on in this, but again, you know, you've got Pekka Rinne for stopping a lot of these goals against the Red Wings, and he was on top of his game, and they're moving on.
It's kind of a boring series, too, in general. Because
Honestly,
there's no threat of any comebacks. I mean, it was a 4-2 brand of hockey. You know, and Detroit really just didn't want to belong, really. I mean.
Yeah, you can definitely tell it that Nashville was really pushing and wanting to win these games whenever you were watching them as it was going on. But, you know, I like watching Detroit. I think they're fun in the playoffs. If you let them get past the first round, they're definitely tough. They're tough to beat after that. We saw them in 2 Game 7 series a couple years ago versus the Penguins, and you just can't count them out. So it's pretty much of a disappointment to see one of the big guys out. But like you said, first time since 2006, they haven't made cuts.
And Detroit with Nicholas Lindstrom.
Right.
We don't know if he's going to come back next season, so he could have played his last game in a Detroit Red Wings uniform, which is kind of sad.
Which would be sad to see, yeah.
All right, well, now we know the Eastern Conference is still up in the air. We'll talk a little bit about the future matchups in the Western Conference. And, well, there are going to be some good ones. St. Louis Blues go and take on the Los Angeles Kings as a 7 seed. I mean, I want to hear your prediction on this one. I think it's going to be a great matchup. I really think that these two goalies, again, you can fire out Halak or Brian Elliott, but you know Jonathan Quick's going to be there. What do you think Los Angeles has to do to beat St. Louis?
Well, St. Louis, I think, in order to beat them, you're going to have to stop their power play. In the last series, they just absolutely had a powerhouse power play, and they capitalized against San Jose with that. The Kings have a penalty kill, though, that is pretty good. So they've got a lot of great defensemen. So I think they actually have a good chance of being able to stop that power play. So I think we'll actually see a pretty decent matchup with this. But if you ask me who I'm going to pick, I think I'm going to go with St. Louis on this one.
St. Louis. I actually, to be honest with you, don't. I would like the LA Kings to win. I like Kopitar. He's a good player. Drew Doughty, you just mentioned, he's one of the best upcoming defensemen. Well, I shouldn't even say up-and-coming. Young defensemen in the NHL. They have a great blue line attack, the Kings do. They play great defense, like you just talked about. I think Jonathan Quick comes up in this series. I like the LA Kings in this one only because they're kind of riding the wave of momentum. They haven't really sniffed a second-round matchup in a long time.
You're right.
And neither is really the St. Louis Blues, dating back to like the early 2000s. So I think you're going to see a great series. I think it's going to go Game 6 or Game 7. You won't see anything like you saw in the first round with these two teams kind of, the Kings showed why they were better than the Canucks and the Blues likewise over the Sharks. I think this game's going to head, longer than people expect. I think it's going to go Game 6 or Game 7, but I like the LA Kings.
All right. We'll agree to disagree on this one. That's fine.
Yeah. And then, all right, well, then we also got Nashville Predators taking on the Phoenix Coyotes. Phoenix has not been there since they were the Winnipeg Jets, and they have not won a first-round matchup since then. I think Phoenix, like you talked about, Mike Smith, great goaltender. I don't know who to take in this one. I think that I haven't really watched too many of these teams, but you seem to talk about Nashville pretty highly. So I don't know about this one, but what's your take on this?
I'm pretty torn on this one too. I don't really know what I'm going to say about it. Either one of these teams. I mean, both guys have great goalies. They're both kind of young teams, and it's kind of up in the air on this one with the West. I mean, I don't think everyone would have predicted Nashville and Phoenix in this together, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, right. I mean, again, 2 coin flip games or series games to decide the championship. I think it's going to be a great one. I like the LA Kings. I don't really know who to take in the Nashville game. I think I'm just going to go Phoenix because I haven't been there before. So I'm going to take two underdogs in this one.
I'm going to take Nashville, and that's only because I think they have a cute player in Mike Fisher. That's
now he's going to go all chalk on this one. So, all right. Well, Eastern Conference. Let's talk a little bit about some scenarios. We'll take you through we already know that two teams have already punched their ticket in the second round, Washington Capitals and Philadelphia Flyers. In order for the Flyers to meet the Capitals in the next round, this is what's going to happen. Ottawa's going to win tonight, and the Panthers have to win tomorrow. Tonight as well, and then we'll see tomorrow. I mean, it'll be decided by 11:30 tonight, or, 10:30, 11, however we want to say it. But if the Caps, obviously the Caps will play the Philadelphia Flyers if the Panthers win tonight against the Devils, and if the Ottawa Senators beat the Rangers, which I kind of don't see happening, but weird things have happened in Game 7s.
I don't really see that happening either. It's just going to be too tough, I think, with the Rangers being at home against the Ottawa Senators. Rangers, Lundqvist is so fired up after that game. I think he's going to be a brick wall tonight, and honestly, I think he has to be, especially if he can get his motions in check after Game 6, then he should be tough to get by tonight. And if that's the case, and New York goes in and end up playing the Capitals are going to be up against the same type of thing that they were up in against Boston, because you've got Tim Thomas that was in goal, and now you've got Lundqvist who's going to be in goal for New York. So if that's the way, that's going to be a pretty tough series.
Yeah, absolutely right. And Anderson, the goalie for the Senators, Mike Anderson, he's pretty good. I caught a little bit of the game a couple nights ago, and you talked about that Game 6 and how it kind of carried over into Game 7. That momentum might help the New York Rangers as much as it could hurt the Ottawa Senators. But like I said, they did get Daniel Alfredsson back tonight, so who knows? But you said 0-4 in the Game 7s, Ottawa. That does not, history tends to repeat itself, unless you're the Boston Bruins, who were 3-0 last season in Game 7s. So that didn't really work out too well.
Maybe this will be the year that everything changes, and maybe Ottawa won't pull a lot off.
And another team too, the Florida Panthers. I mean, their goaltending is so weak. It's really been an up and down type season for Theodore and for Clemens and their backup goalie.
Right.
I like the New Jersey Devils tonight because of Martin Brodeur. I mean, he's been there so many times. They played so well with him.
I think when it comes down to it too, New Jersey's just they're a playoff team. New Jersey's a playoff team. I think they find a way to pull things off at the last minute. With Theodore being out in Game 6 and coming back in this Game 7, he might be a little shaky if that injury's not totally healed by now. So I think that it might come down to, unfortunately, goaltenders again. Okay, so we're gonna give a little prediction right now. So now, obviously, we haven't seen Game 7s tonight. I feel like the Capitals will play the Rangers and the Flyers are gonna play the Devils. I agree. And that Flyers-Devils series, even the Flyers, you watched them all game long for that series. I really think that the Devils will slow down the Flyers, make them into making some bad decisions like they always do, and then the Devils will capitalize on that. And I could definitely see the Devils in 6 in that game. Really? Yeah, in that series. I think since the Flyers have had this much time off to be able to prepare for things, I think that will just kind of help them. I mean, maybe this much time off isn't good going into the next series, but with Briere and Yager and all those powerhouses, Giroux going into this, I think they're going to be able to pull it off. I mean, they beat the Penguins, so. I mean, no one can beat the Penguins. They're the unstoppable. But absolutely. They also gave up 10 goals in one game. That's fine. We'll move on to that one. We won't hurt you any more than what you're. I will always love my Penguins. So, anyways, all right. So, like I said, I like the Devils in that. Capitals and New York Rangers. Man, I mean, they played each other past 2 years in the playoffs. Or I should say the past 2 or 3 years in the playoffs. It seems like the Capitals have Henrik Lundqvist's number, winning those series. I think that if Washington sticks to his game plan, like they did against Boston, they will have a great chance of dethroning the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference. As much as I hate to admit this, I will agree with you on this one, Rob. Last year going into the playoffs as President's Cup winners, the Caps had so much momentum going into the season, and it was always a disappointment going into the playoffs that they didn't do so well. This year, they kind of have a little bit of a shaky season, and I think going into the playoffs, this is only going to help them. So I called this from day one going into playoffs with the Capitals. I think even though they didn't have the best season, I think they're going to actually maybe come out on top going into the playoffs. I can't believe I'm admitted that, but I think I'm going to. They've been the hottest team. Well, I shouldn't say the hottest team, but they've definitely have a hot goaltender in Braden Holtby. And he's young. I mean, he's got nothing to lose. He's just here to show himself, and I think he's been doing an absolutely great job. Yeah, and you know what? And that's the thing. That's how you win the Stanley Cup. I mean, he rode Fleury, all the way down the road, and I mean, you got obviously you have great goal scoring for the Penguins. They ended up winning. The Blackhawks really didn't have a strong goaltender,
And you know what? The name totally escapes me. Whoever was in goal for them. I think it was. I think wasn't it Crawford that was their goalie or no?
I don't even know either.
Well, it was. I know that they had Hue for a
That's
little
fine.
bit, but anyways,
Eastern
yeah,
Conference
exactly.
know-it-alls.
You talk about that, and then Tim Thomas last season. All those Game 7s that he won, guys get ice in his veins. So the recipe for to win a Stanley Cup is great defense and timely goaltending. That's what I've always preached. I think the Capitals will definitely beat the Rangers if they do play each other. And then you'll talk, and we can talk about a Caps Flyers Eastern Conference final, which would be great for me because I have a lot of Flyer fans, and I would love to see them lose. And then in the Western Conference too, I guess you got. I have the LA Kings, and we were disagreeing on both those series.
We are.
But all right, so Natalie, want to hear who your Stanley Cup prediction is?
Honestly, I'm going to go with someone from the West. I'm going to think that St. Louis is going to pull this off. I just said going into the playoffs, St. Louis and the Canucks were kind of neck and neck. I'm going to go with the Western Conference winner this year, and I'm going to say St. Louis.
All right, well, I'm going to be the homer. I'm going to take the Washington Capitals to win it all. I just think that, over time they've developed this, score second, defense minded. I really think it's going to help them in the long run. I mean, no one, obviously I didn't like them skating, barely by the skin of their teeth making it to the playoffs this season, but they did it anyways. They have a lot to prove, really nothing to lose type thing. I like the Capitals. You like the Blues. Let's talk a little bit about the NBA draft coming up, or the NFL draft coming up. You got Andrew Luck, first pick of the draft. RG3 with the Redskins, great. I couldn't be any happier to see RG3. I like that. I like that, Phil. Thank you. And for the NBA draft coming up, the Wizards hopefully will have the top 3 pick. Unfortunately, again for like the 10th straight year, I would hope that my little kid Gilchrist from Kentucky falls in their lap. I don't know if you're a big basketball fan at all.
Yeah, I'm a big East fan, so I'm a big Pitt fan, and they didn't do too well this year, so I didn't follow too much basketball. But now Pitt's moving into the ACC, so next year that's going to be pretty exciting.
There you go. All right, well, Phil, thanks again for directing the show. Becca, thanks for those tickets for the Washington Wizards. For Natalie Gerson, I'm Rob Castro. Thanks again for watching Fantasy Sports Review. See you next time.